am a lawyer, but I am not necessarily your lawyer. The materials discussed in this podcast are for informational purposes only and should not be deemed legal advice. If you have a specific legal question according to your circumstances, then I encourage you to speak with an attorney licensed in your jurisdiction. Welcome back to another edition of Ag Law Today. We've got a unique topic that we're going to be talking about. It's different than a lot of the other episodes, but I'm really looking forward to it. We're going to be talking agriculture, mass torts, and class action. We've got two very special guests. We've got Josh Rohrscheib and Zach Anderson. Welcome to the podcast, guys.
Thank you, Cari.
Thank you, Cari.
Hey, Josh, why don't you, and then we'll go to you, Zach. Josh, who are you, where are you, and what do you do?
Well, thanks, Cari. I'm an attorney in Central Illinois with the law firm Boland Robinson and Ellis, so we go by Bree Law. And Zach and I are partners. We have offices throughout Central Illinois. I'm in our Bloomington office. Zach is in our Decatur office, and we also have an office in Sullivan and in Lincoln. I practice personal injury law and also help Zach and some of our other partners with some of our MDL and class action work.
And Zach, how about for yourself? You're in the Decatur office. Can you tell our listeners more about who you are and what you do?
Hi, pleasure to be here, Cari. Yes, as Josh pointed out, I work out of our Decatur office. We have multiple offices throughout Central Illinois, which uniquely positions us to help a variety of clients in a variety of different areas. My practice is focused predominantly on mass torts, class actions, and personal injury. I live in Mount Zion, which is where I went to high school at and where I grew up. I live with my wife, Morgan, who is expecting our first child, which I'm really excited about. We have two golden doodles.
Nice.
If I didn't say the golden doodles, Morgan might listen to this and get upset. So
well, I have a golden retriever. I have a special love for goldens as a whole. So that's great. So I'm curious. I love asking lawyers this question. Why did you go to law school? And I will start with Josh. How about you?
I took kind of a different pathway than most lawyers. After undergrad, I worked in politics. And then I found that, having a law degree would open a lot of doors and kind of help. It kind of creates an automatic credibility, whether it should or not. So I went to law school in part because I saw the folks who were doing the kind of policy work I wanted to do tended to have law degrees. So I went to the University of Illinois College of Law, where I see you teach, Cari, and I had a great experience there. And then I worked in Washington, D.C. for a global law firm, doing some litigation work and also some political work. And then I just kind of felt the call to return home. So I moved back to Central Illinois and then practiced with a few small firms. And then about 5 years ago, I joined Bree Law.
And Zach, how about for you?
I graduated college during the Great Recession. So I ended up not being able to find a job in my chosen undergraduate major, which was history. So I started working construction. I worked as a union fire sprinkler fitter for a couple of years. And I don't know, I just started exploring the idea of going to law school. I realized that I didn't want to do construction for my entire life. I ended up taking the LSAT and ended up getting a pretty good scholarship to go to the University of Illinois College of Law. So I got a job at Boland Robinson and Ellis, which is my current firm, to make sure that I wanted to become a lawyer. And then after working here for a couple of months, I realized that was what I wanted to do. So I jumped in and started the U of I.
So Zach, I'm curious, what pulled you in the direction of doing personal injury and mass tort type work? And what do you like most about what you do?
So whenever I was in law school, I can't remember if it was my first or second summer, but one of those summers, I attended a trial in Kansas with my cousin slash mentor slash managing partner of Bree Law, which is how I got the job before law school, who had been selected to the executive committee of a really large class action case. And just watching the trial and watching how all of that worked really led me down the path of wanting to represent people who are harmed. And so I really like that component of it, like helping somebody who has been harmed, recover financially for those harms. But I also like problem solving, and that's a lot of what being a lawyer is just solving problems. So I've just found that both of those aspects have been or can be found in mass torts, class actions, and personal injury. So I really like the area.
And Josh, how about for you? Like, what pulled you in the direction of PI?
I was a general practitioner for several years when I first moved back to Central Illinois, and then I was in an auto accident. I did a little bit of defense work for injury cases, but when I was actually injured in a car accident, I felt, it's a kind of an overwhelming feeling. There are things about it that are confusing. I felt just a certainty that the insurance companies were absolutely out to settle my claim for as little as possible. And so I kind of had to learn how to handle that type of case for myself. And then I had friends, family, and other clients who needed help in that area. And over time, my practice evolved more and more into that area. I find it really rewarding and enjoyable to help people through a tough time in their life. There's a certain kind of like Robin Hood aspect of it that I think is appealing, where you're kind of fighting for the little guy and trying to help them get their life back when they've been through something really hard.
So to shift gears and talk more specifically about ag mass torts, our class actions, let's just start at the big picture. Like, what is a tort? And then what's a mass tort?
So a tort is just a situation where somebody has been wronged typically due to another person's negligence. So in the context of personal injury, which is what Josh referred to a moment ago, if somebody drives their car into the rear end of another person's car, the person that caused the accident is considered a tortfeasor. On a larger scale, a mass tort is just a situation where there have been a lot of people harmed, and who either they're harmed in the same way, they suffer the same injuries, or there's some degree of similarity between exactly what happened and the outcome for the injured party, to where the torts can be combined into one cause of action.
So I'd like to bring up a specific example that most of our listeners know at least a little bit about, which is the notorious Syngenta litigation. So can one of you just tell me a little bit more about this particular issue?
Sure. So the Syngenta case arose because Syngenta brought a variety of genetically modified corn to market that was not approved for import into certain countries. The most significant of those was China. And China was turning around container ships full of corn on the ocean. And they basically refused to import US corn because of what Syngenta did. So it effectively destroyed the largest growing import market for US corn. And with just basic supply and demand, that hurt the price that farmers all over America got when they went to sell their corn. So the rejection by China, it was billions of dollars in lost revenue for American corn farmers. The trial that Zach mentioned, our senior partner Chris Ellis was on the executive committee of the Syngenta class action, and Zach and Chris and a few others watched one of the first trials. And there was a jury trial in Kansas that had a verdict of $217 million, which ultimately led to a global settlement of $1.5 billion. And then firms like ours helped farmers obtain a recovery from those funds.
What advice would you, knowing now what happened with the Syngenta litigation, what advice would you give to farmers who are worried about something like this perhaps happening again, or what should they do if they think that something like this is happening at another point in time?
Well, one thing is keep good records. A lot of our farm clients are amazing record keepers for people who haven't like worked in an office environment or haven't worked like in a library or something. It's remarkable what great record keepers some of our farm clients are. But another is to reach, if you think that there's a product that has harmed you and your neighbors, to talk to a lawyer who's knowledgeable in this area. Zach, anything you'd add to that? Or
Record keeping is a big one. My role on a lot of the cases that I'm involved in is to help or to work on the discovery side of things, which I know discovery is a legal term that a lot of your listeners may not know. So discovery typically means that if you're part of a case, you have to produce documents to show your harm. And as Josh alluded to in the discovery process, that means we have to go back and obtain a bunch of records and documents and things like that, many of which may have been created years, even decades before. So it's important for farmers to keep track of their records. It's important for anybody, keep track of your records and things of that nature. That way, in the event that you are later involved in litigation or something to where you need to reference those documents, you can do so and you don't have to spend hours and hours and hours searching for them.
So other than Syngenta, what are some other ag mass torts or class action that you think our listeners should be aware of?
I'm on the leadership committee of one right now involving certain brands of 303 tractor hydraulic fluid. The brands of tractor hydraulic fluid that are involved in this litigation were sold at Tractor Supply, Rural King, Orscheln Farm and Home, and then Atwoods. They were sold in the 303 tractor hydraulic fluid was sold in these big 5-gallon yellow buckets. And people would just go to the store, buy a couple, take them home. Farmers would use them in their equipment. My grandfather used it in his backhoe that he has. People would use them, just for anything that has hydraulics, log splitters. The thing about the oil, though, is, or we have alleged, that it is deceptively labeled, and it does not provide a lot of the positive properties that the label claims that it does. And in fact, we have put forth some evidence and anticipate being able to prove that the tractor hydraulic fluid, when used in certain kinds of equipment, can cause that equipment to become damaged. Some of our clients, for example, have used a lot of this stuff, and they have thousands and thousands of dollars in equipment damage. It is effectively, to a certain extent, significantly harmed their livelihoods just by using an oil that they bought, a fluid that they bought over the counter from Rural King. So that's one that I'm involved in currently that I think your listeners should be aware of, because a lot of folks, like my grandpa, probably don't even know that the litigation exists. And we're at a stage right now where we have a partial settlement, and anybody who bought the fluid needs to consider making a claim in our settlement if they want to obtain any sort of a financial recovery.
So that brings me to my next question for our listeners. I mean, if they feel like they have been harmed, but they might be part of a large group of people that have been similarly harmed, what advice do you give to people on how do you locate the other people that might be similarly harmed?
That's often a very difficult challenge. So in this case, in my 303 case that I had just referred to, we've been able to send notice to people who bought the fluid from one of those 4 retailers, provided that they purchased the fluid using a tax exemption. Because if they purchased using a tax exemption, the retailer had to keep records of the sales in their own database. But a lot of times it's hard to reach out to people who may have been affected by something like this. So it's important for farmers and for folks involved in agriculture to stay up to a certain extent on a litigation and some of the emerging trends in agriculture, because at the end of the day, when there's a settlement in a big agricultural case such as Syngenta, we want to make sure that folks who deserve money get the money that they deserve. And anybody who misses those opportunities may be missing out on obtaining compensation for a loss that they suffered that they might not have even known that they suffered, if that makes sense.
So I do litigation myself, is more in the family law arena, although I do some commercial litigation too. But when you're talking about litigation like this with mass torts, class actions, et cetera, how long are these lawsuits? How long do they last? If, let's just say, and I understand that things can settle in myriad phases, but like, what if you took a case all the way to trial?
So I'll give you a lawyer answer. Each case is different.
There you go.
So in the Syngenta case, this is just off the top of my head, I want to say that the Syngenta case was filed in fall. The first cases were filed in the fall of 2015. And those cases were filed on behalf of corn farmers in a bunch of different states. I can't remember how many, but filed in fall of 2015. In 2000, I think it was the summer of 2017, the first trial, which was the trial that Josh referenced earlier, was conducted. It was a 3-week trial in Kansas. It was on behalf of Kansas farmers, so it was a Kansas subclass. So that case took about 2 years to get to trial. In the 303 cases, I think our case has been on file for over 2 years now. We're not anywhere close to a trial. We're still going through the discovery process. I anticipate if there is a trial, it wouldn't be until 2023, maybe 2022. I don't know. That'd be pushing it. So, it can take a couple of years. Other times there are cases that, as you know, they get filed and the defendant says, yeah, we messed up, or whatever the case may be, and there may be a quick settlement. But those are increasingly rare.
Cari, one other thing I wanted to mention about Zach's answer about one thing your farm listeners may want to know. I think sometimes there's a skepticism about these kinds of cases where people assume that there won't be a lot of value to them. But like in one of the 303 settlements that Zach's been involved in, it seemed to me like the farmers the purchasers got great value from the efforts of the lawyers. I mean, Zach, didn't they pretty much get for one of the partial settlements, basically their money back or most of it, plus there's a big fund for equipment repair?
Yeah, so I'm involved in multiple cases involving different brands of the 303 truck hydraulic fluid. And in a case we had against Citgo Petroleum Company, or I can't remember actually the name of the actual corporation, but Citgo. There was a $19 million settlement, and anybody who purchased one of the 5-gallon buckets that Citgo manufactured was able to obtain, it was over $20 for each 5-gallon bucket. And the 5-gallon bucket retail price was between 25 and 30. So most folks who bought a bucket were able to get most of their money back. In addition, there was a multi-million-dollar equipment fund that was established. And anybody who had repairs to their equipment or needed to make repairs to their equipment, didn't have the money to advance to do that, were able to make claims through that equipment repair damage fund, and were able to obtain in many cases thousands of dollars to fix their equipment that had been harmed by the oil. So yeah, people were very happy about that, especially because a lot of folks, they would have numerous hydraulic issues with their equipment, have no idea what was causing it, and then they heard about our litigation, and a light bulb would go off. Oh my God, I've been using this oil for years. That's what's causing all of these hydraulic issues. It's not, some gremlin that's that's running around my equipment just wreaking havoc.
Similarly with Syngenta, I think a lot of our clients were surprised at how much money was basically like found money to them, but all they had to do was submit a claim.
So in a situation like that, I've been thinking, are there any disadvantages really for farmers in joining a class action if they have been harmed that they should be aware of?
Do you want me to
Zach,
answer?
Want to field that? Me too.
So I'll give you another lawyer answer. It depends on the case. If in a class action, if you're a class member and you do not want to participate, you can opt out. That's a right that every class member has. And in Syngenta and in 303, we have people who opt out for whatever reason. They don't want to be involved in the class action, and that's okay. That's everyone's right to opt out. If somebody does opt out of a class action, they may feel like they may want to bring their own individual case, and in the hopes that they can obtain a recovery that is higher than what they can obtain through the class action case. And if they're able to accomplish that, then yeah, it is more advantageous not to be part of the class action, just to bring your own case. The problem, though, is it's often very challenging to do that, especially when the defendant is a large multinational corporation with billions of dollars in assets and teams of lawyers that are ready to fight you. So I guess in theory, opting out could be one advantage.
Another high cost, high hassle, hard to find lawyers who would want to pursue an individual case. I mean, just the experts to try to prove an individual case that would be really cost prohibitive in a lot of these matters.
Yeah.
So to shift gears, I'm curious, is there any litigation right now regarding Roundup? I know that that's a very common chemical that's used on farms. Josh, are you aware of any pending litigation at this time?
Yeah. We actually just last week had a client who had a Roundup case that was settled, and we're not handling Roundup cases in-house, but through the work of our partner, Zach and Chris Ellis and John Robinson, some of our other partners, we've got a lot of relationships with other firms who are in leadership roles of these other mass tort and class action cases. So we're usually able to if someone comes to us with a case, we're usually able to find a lawyer with the expertise to help them. But in basically the Roundup cases, there was a correlation found between Roundup and non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I think a lot of your listeners, viewers have probably seen the ads about those cases. That litigation really began, I think, in 2016. And as it's progressed, more and more of the cases are settling. There was last year, there was a fund established, something like 10 billion, 11 billion to pay existing claims. And those claims are still ongoing and still being settled.
And but despite all this litigation, Josh, I mean, I have Roundup at my house. I mean, it's still being sold. Isn't that right?
Yeah, that's right. And I think unfortunately, there's kind of a cold calculating business decision that it's such a profitable product. It's still on the market, still being sold. And hopefully people are using a lot more caution and care when handling it. And there's at least more knowledge for consumers now about some of the risks of handling, especially large amounts of Roundup.
Are there any other agricultural related mass torts and class actions our listeners should be aware of?
There's another one that just started this year that I think some lawyers think may grow to the size of the Roundup litigation and some of the other large scale litigation, and that concerns paraquat. Paraquat is an herbicide that is sprayed throughout the country, especially right here in central Illinois, to kill weeds. I believe it's sprayed before harvest. I guess I could be incorrect about that. I'm sure your listeners would know better than I do. But the paraquat has been linked to causing Parkinson's disease. It's been, scientists have looked at this at a potential link between paraquat and Parkinson's disease for many years. It's coming out recently that there's a heightened risk of Parkinson's disease just if somebody lives or is within 1,600 feet of where paraquat is sprayed. And the one scary aspect of paraquat, to me anyway, is that paraquat is banned in a lot of countries. It's banned in China, which paraquat's banned in China, but
where anything goes, yeah.
Well, not just where anything goes, but Syngenta is actually one of the companies that sells commercialized paraquat, and Syngenta is now owned by Chinese. It's now a Chinese company for all intents and purposes. Paraquat's banned in Syria, which they just had a pretty large war, and there are a lot of some dangerous stuff there, but paraquat's not one of them. But paraquat is allowed to be sprayed here in the United States, provided it is sprayed by a licensed commercial applicator, which licensed commercial applicator means I believe somebody has to take a test and maybe has to take a course or two to become a licensed commercial applicator. But I don't think the bar is too high. And I was in a meeting earlier this year when paraquat and the Parkinson's links were being established and discussed among lawyers, and somebody showed a map. It was a map of the United States, and it just showed high rates of where paraquat was sprayed. And central and southern Illinois were areas where this stuff was sprayed quite extensively. And then somebody showed a map of the United States, and it showed the prevalence of Parkinson's disease. And the two maps seem to really mirror one another. There were higher rates of Parkinson's disease in central and southern Illinois than in many other areas of the country. And that to me is just, it's frightening to know that it's something that is sprayed outside, but can be picked up by the wind and moved around or whatever, can cause something as debilitating as Parkinson's disease.
So for our listeners who maybe they have worked with a lawyer in the past, maybe they have not, they're wondering if they should, if they've been harmed, they're not sure what they've been harmed from exactly. At what point should a person contact a personal injury or a mass tort attorney?
I think as soon as they realize there could be an issue, because some of these cases, well, all of these cases would have a statute of limitations, and some of them would also have funds that are built for claimants, and when the funds are gone, they're gone. So, like with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma Roundup claims, there are tens of thousands of people submitting claims. There's a claim fund, and we would like our clients to be able to benefit from the claim fund that's been established while the funds are still available. So the sooner the better. It's always a good idea to start the process as soon as they can.
And what advice would you give to our listeners? I know that the two of you are here in the state of Illinois. We have listeners from coast to coast. What recommendations do you have for our listeners who are looking for the right lawyer that's licensed in their particular jurisdiction?
Well, typically it's probably not the best idea just to call whatever number you see in a TV ad. I think with any kind of legal matter where you need help, your best bet is to start with a lawyer that you know and trust and to go to them for a referral. And we get a lot of referrals from other lawyers in Central Illinois because they know our firm has a history of working on class action and MDLs. And because of that history, we have relationships with firms in leadership of these cases around the country. So we can help make sure that our clients get to the best lawyers for them. And there are a lot of criteria we use in that. One is simply how have we experienced that firm treating our clients in the past? Whenever I refer out a client of mine or bring in another like co-counsel, I want to make sure it's someone who's going to take the time to get back to my client, who's going to be responsive, who's going to treat them with kindness and dignity and be attentive to their needs. Also, we want to, whenever possible, we want to try to get our clients to a firm that has a great reputation for success, and whenever possible, a firm that's in leadership of one of these cases. As I mentioned, our partner Chris was on the executive committee of the Syngenta class action, and that isn't just like a kind of first in line kind of thing. They're selected by the federal judge in charge of the case. So you have the benefit, if you go to a firm that's in leadership of one of these cases, of having sort of some vetting by the federal judge in charge. And so we see a lot of advantages of referring folks to firms in leadership. They will have the benefit of lawyers who are very knowledgeable about the subject matter. We tend to think they probably have a better chance of maximizing the recovery, some chance of being what's called a bellwether case, which can have being like a trial that's used to help establish the value of the claims, which is only likely to happen if you're one of the cases sort of leading the charge. So I think those are some of the considerations that we have when we have clients come to us who have a claim that maybe isn't one that we're handling directly.
Zach, do you have anything to add on that? Just, I guess, advice for our listeners on finding the right fit?
Josh hit the nail on the head. It's all about finding a lawyer that you trust. If you're if you're harmed in some way, your first call should probably be to your lawyer who you've worked with for a long time, assuming you have one. If you don't have one, and if they don't have a referral, then you're going to have to do your own research to see who would be the right fit for you. And I think the best place to start is to always look at who's involved in leadership in the cases, because if somebody's involved in leadership, chances are they're taking new clients. And if somebody's involved in leadership, they're going to be privy to information and proceedings and documents and things like that a firm that's not in a leadership capacity probably would not be privy to.
So before we close, I have one last question, and we are a year and a half, it feels like 10 years into COVID at this point. But what has been the biggest silver lining for you over the last year and a half, since, I mean, it's probably been a little bit longer than that, but while COVID has been higher level here in the United States?
Well, I think a few things. It's brought out the entire legal profession into the future. And we were in dire need of being dragged into the future as a profession. With the tech changes that courts all over America have adopted, I think should help with access to justice for all sorts of people. I think on just a more personal level, it's helped me, I think, appreciate the in-person time I have with friends, and can kind of to not take some things for granted that I'm sure I was taking for granted before all these changes.
Yeah, I wonder, Josh, I feel like Zoom hearings are here to stay with at least some of the courts and things. Would you agree with that?
I sure hope so. It's funny how, I mean, it's kind of odd that this isn't just like, there's not just like a statewide system and that every county just kind of does things their own way. But in McLean County, where I practice mostly, all of the civil cases are the routine hearings are just conducted by Zoom, and I think everyone prefers it that way. And some of the other counties where we practice, it hasn't been as widely adopted because maybe the courts just aren't quite as enthusiastic about it. They like having people before them. How are things in where you're practicing, Cari?
Yeah, it's mixed. It depends on the judge. It depends on the county. And, so I wonder if over time there will be more uniformity with that. I'm very impressed with McLean County, with every judge having their own Zoom code. It's very easy to find that information. So
your clients like it more when you're like your family law clients, because if it's a contentious thing, they don't have to be with their, in the same room, walking in, walking out with their the spouse they're divorcing, or how do your clients feel about it?
Yeah, so I think I'm going to follow Zach and say it depends, and I think it depends a little bit on the case. I've had to do my very first cross-examination on Zoom with a witness that was in the courtroom that couldn't see. And so that really challenged my skill set. So I think, I think that there's definitely a lot of positives, and there's some negatives to doing things remotely as well. But overall, I agree with you, Josh, that it's kind of forced the legal profession to move things forward. I mean, there's no reason why people should be traveling 1,000 miles to attend a court date for something that's very simple and doesn't need an evidentiary hearing and things like that. So, and Zach, how about you? Any silver linings during this experience, I guess?
One of the silver linings I guess I've had is I've really learned to respect what people do for their profession. And I know that may sound a little strange, but my wife's an ICU nurse. She's been treating COVID patients since the very beginning of the pandemic. And she had a hard time for a while, especially when cases were really high and she was working, 6 days a week, 12-hour shifts each time. And it really made me respect the work that she was doing and that nurses across the country were doing. And, that's been, I guess I didn't ever really realized how hard of a job that nursing was until the pandemic started. And realizing that about nursing has helped me understand a lot of other professions as well. I mean, in working on these 303 cases, I talked to hundreds of farmers from across the country who have been infected by this stuff, and I've just gained a greater appreciation for them as well, and for everything that they do to make sure that we can eat. So I guess the silver lining for me has just been to I don't know, to respect other people's professions and respect what other people are doing. I never really realized that until the pandemic, and until I was taught a very important lesson, and that's not to take nurses for granted.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I hope that we get to the other side of this at some point here sooner than later. But in the meantime, where can our listeners find you? What's your contact information? Are you on social media? Is there anything that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Well, for our firm, we're at breelaw.com. Our primary phone number is 217-429-4296. I also have a personal website. It's rohrscheiblaw.com, and I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. Folks can connect with me wherever they'd like. How about you, Zach?
Websites, www.breelaw.com. Email address is zanderson@breelaw.com. And as Josh pointed out, we're both on Facebook, both on LinkedIn. You're happy to shoot me a message, shoot me a friend request, whatever you'd like to do.
Awesome. Well, I so appreciate your guys' time and shedding a light on this very important topic.
Thank you
for having us, Cari.